the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is photographer Julius Shulman and chef Teri Valentine. Julius Shulman, who was born in 1910, is known as the master of architectural camera work. His family moved from Connecticut to Los Angeles when he was 10 years old. Julius spent years, maybe 7, at UCLA and UC Berkeley. What were you studying, Julius?
As we say in the vernacular, I was studying nothing.
Oh, is that what happened?
I had 7 great years not studying any one course. I devoted my time to attending lectures of subjects I chose. Without credits. I never graduated.
Is that right?
I had 7 great years.
Did you go to architecture classes?
No. Oh, no.
Did you go to photography classes?
No.
Oh, my.
I didn't ever in my life plan to become a photographer.
Well, what were you going to do?
Nothing.
Oh, come on, Julius.
No.
That was 90 years ago.
Well,
80 years ago.
Listen, let me simplify it. I went to university. I studied engineering at UCLA in September 1929. Within 2 weeks, I claimed that I was the world's first dropout. Because until 1960, there were no dropouts until the hippie days.
Is that right?
So at the end of 2 weeks, I said, what am I doing here? So I entered the School of Liberal Arts at UCLA. I finished that semester. The next 4 years at UCLA, and then 2 more years at Berkeley. So I had 7 years of doing nothing but going to classes which I wanted to study.
Did you have a good time?
I had a ball.
Well, what happens then? What twist of fate came into your life that changed it?
Very wonderful, simple answer to that question. I woke up one morning, this was in February 1936, and I had just awakened from a deep sleep. Suddenly, I got out of bed, went in the kitchen. My friend and I had an apartment for $25 a month, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths in Berkeley. Now, I said, Milt, my friend, I've decided to go home. I've had 7 years of doing nothing. And within a couple of days, I got my stuff packed up, got my 1932 DeSoto coupe with a rumble seat, 6-wire wheels, a very nice car, $200. Anyhow, I drove home. And then, cutting to a practice of what we're talking about now, to present times, I got a call from a publisher in Munich, Germany, who had seen this book that we have here. He read this part about my transition from bumming around for 7 years to the part where I described my driving home from Berkeley, February 1936. He asked me, well, Shulman, he said, you didn't say anything about your future. You had been going to school for 7 years. Didn't you think about what was going to happen when you got home after that length of time? No major, no cap and gown. I said, no, I didn't think about this. You're the first person ever asked me that question. Do you ever think back, though? Weren't you concerned what was going to do? How you going to make a living?
Right.
What kind of profession would you pursue? I said, no, I never thought of that myself until you asked me the question. But, I said, I'm a firm believer, always in my life, in faith, my karma, if you will, or destiny. Apparently, from what happened, 2 weeks after I came home from Berkeley, after 7 years, I met a young man who worked for the architect Richard Neutra. He was going to inspect a new house that was under construction. He wanted to know if I'd like to visit the house with him. He had to meet the contractor there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did have a little Kodak vest pocket camera, which I used to take snapshots of everything as a hobby. So while he was in the house, I photographed this house, 6 different compositions, not thinking anything of the future, and made the 8x10 glossy prints, gave it to the young man that week. He called me immediately, said, "Mr. Neutra loves your photographs." I didn't know who Mr. Neutra was. I had never met an architect before.
Oh, that's what I wondered, how you got into that world of architecture. I see it now.
I was destined.
Right.
Because why was I existing for 7 years in the form of a hiatus in my life?
But how did you then start meeting all these architects? Because you were very friendly with that group of architects at that time.
Yeah,
Mr. Neutra started it?
It happened again. My fate, as I told this man in Munich, Germany, when he called me on the phone, he asked me, "Weren't you concerned?" I said, "No, because apparently I was destined." Because when I photographed the Neutra modern house, I had never seen a modern house before in my life. I took 6 compositions, and Neutra had the composition, the prints in his hand when I shook hands with him on Saturday, March 5th. Next week is going to be a celebration of my 67th year of photography.
Wow.
So that day, I met Neutra. He saw the photographs and asked me, "These pictures are beautiful. Are you an architect? Are you a photographer?"
Right.
I said, "No, neither of the above. I don't plan to be anything. I didn't plan anything in my life. Nothing has been planned. I've been ordained," I've concluded.
Well, you're lucky, and we're lucky, and the architects are lucky, because you documented the most important period of architecture that could have gone totally undocumented if a genius hadn't come along.
Well, it is gratifying, and it's sobering.
Tell me, you worked with Schindler at the time, Frank Lloyd Wright, Soriano?
Soriano, Gregory Ain, Harold
Niemeyer.
Harris. I met all the architects, as most of my work was published in magazines.
Did you, the other ones coming into the 50s, Buff Hensman,
Buff, Straub, and Hensman.
Elwood?
You name it, I knew them all.
What I know, you knew them all. When they had you, and they all wanted you to photograph their houses.
Right.
When they would ask you to come to photograph a house, did they try to set up the photographs, or did they
No.
leave it to you?
The only person that ever did that was Neutra. Because Neutra wanted to,
After you did those pictures in the beginning,
well, what happened? Yes,
and then he wanted to set them up.
he tried that. But whenever he did, he would want to arrange the camera this high, this low, this far, this left, right. So I accepted this, moved the camera as he told me, or had my assistant move the camera. But then, after he went with my assistant to show the next picture he wanted to take, I put the camera back where I had originally. Made the prints, and Neutra never knew the difference.
Well, you did prints. This is the John Lautner house that's sitting on top of a hill. It's a circular house, a chemisphere, they call it. How do you get these kind of shots? Are you hanging from a helicopter? What are you doing? How do you get this distance on them?
I have good, strong wings. I can fly.
That's why you like the angel chairs.
Right, exactly. No, hold that picture up just a moment quickly. One thing photographers have to learn is to learn nature. Observing that there are clouds in the sky that day, and the shadows were scudding, a good word, by the way, the shadows were scudding across, I learned that in elementary school poetry. The shadows were scudding across the valley floor. And I noticed at one moment, when the camera was set for this exposure, that the shadows were creating a light and dark composure of the values of the valley and the framing of the building by the shadow and sunlight. And that picture became renowned for the fact that people wonder how I got the separation.
Well, also, where were you standing? Was there another hill?
No, I got 2 strong feet.
Oh, good. You're not going to tell us any of your secrets.
No,
When you-
I ran track in high school.
When you start, where was high school, by the way?
Roosevelt High School.
Oh, you went to in
In
East
Bo- in-
LA,
in Boyle Heights,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's where.
And then the track meet, I ran half-mile races. And I was also a gymnast in high school, in the gymnasium.
That does not tell me you had to be hanging somewhere or doing something. That tells me you could hold your camera. What kind of a camera were you
Cameras
using?
on a tripod, 4x5 view camera.
Oh, so you weren't holding it. It
No,
was all set up.
all my cameras were taken on tripods, all my pictures. Every picture is composed and planned. And this photograph here, which we'll talk about later.
Did you ever take pictures, portraits?
Yes.
People, portraits?
I should have brought my baby pictures.
No, not your baby pictures.
Oh,
of
yes.
people.
But babies are people.
Okay.
I have a pair of portraits. I wish I could have taken them another time. I almost became a baby photographer
Oh.
because I was able to take one negative of each baby I photographed.
I always look at your work, and I looked at this Taschen book that you have, Julius Shulman, Adventures, what does it say? Architecture and its Photography. And I think of you looking at these houses and doing portraiture of the houses.
Exactly. Why not?
They don't bother you. They're not people. They're not talking back to you. You're doing whatever you want with them.
Architecture is a subject which is alive. It's fraught with many cycles of controversy, argument, contractors, clients,
Right.
carpet people.
Oh, you mean you have a lot? Oh, it's worse than taking a portrait then.
No, quite the contrary. When I come in, everything is ready for me.
Oh,
I say God is good. When I want clouds in the sky, I get clouds.
so there you
When
are.
I want shadows, I get shadows.
Tell us about this, because it is shadows in the pool. And there's such a contrast.
All right, let me tell you about this picture, because I'm
Okay.
happy you have it here.
Okay.
When I see this photograph, it's one of my favorites. This is the home of that wonderful industrial designer, Raymond Loewy.
Oh, yes.
Raymond Loewy is the one that designed the glass bottle, Coca-Cola bottle. He designed Southern Pacific Railroad engines. He designed Studebakers. He was famous for the early Studebakers.
Right.
Loewy bought this property and hired an architect, Albert Frey, in Palm Springs, designed this house for him. Albert designed the house in orientation towards the mountains and the desert. When I see this picture, you know what I think about? Stupid real estate.
Oh, why?
Why? Because if you try to photograph it today, you see across the street only the facade of a heavy artificial Spanish type house, because it has tile roof, not more than about 150 feet across the street. It destroyed this magnificent view. What I am angry about is that Richard
Loewy.
Neutra and Raymond Loewy and all the other designers and architects had opportunities in the early years to buy a piece of land for $200 an acre. Why didn't Raymond Loewy buy this piece of property to protect his view?
Because he didn't have the foresight that you're talking about. I think that there was nothing around at that time. Did you ever decide, after you'd been photographing for a long time, to go into architecture?
No,
no?
absolutely not. Let
Oh,
the
no.
architects do the dirty work.
But the thing with these 50s buildings is there was no room for any paintings to be hung on the walls.
Oh, yes, there was.
Was there?
Of course. The architects sometimes would take them down.
Oh.
Architects have a dismal, short-sighted perspective. When they design a wall or a fireplace, don't you dare put a painting on the fireplace. That's a stone or a brick or tile fireplace. It's meant to shield the flame. All right.
So they actually would come in probably before you did your photographs and maybe take a painting off. Or
If the owners didn't stop them.
So they, in a way, were setting up their things.
No, the architects were not ever permitted by many of the clients to touch whatever's on the walls.
Oh.
In many cases, it was a long story about another house I photographed where I did take something off a wall because I was so indoctrinated by the brick stone fireplace. The architect wasn't with me at that time, but I was so indoctrinated with the purity of the sanctity of an architect's wall of stone. Don't cover the
so
stone
you
with
took-
painting. So in one case, a house that Stuart Williams did in Frank Sinatra house in Palm Springs, by the way. The master bedroom was a fireplace. On the wall were 7 5-by-7-inch English watercolor paintings. And I and my assistant immediately took them down. Because I figured, well, the sanctity of Stuart Williams, he's a modern architect. You're not supposed to put pictures on the wall. And then Stuart Williams got the prints for me and showed them to the decorator who decorated this house for Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
I got a phone call. That same day, that evening, whatever. Mr. So-and-so, he said, Mr. Shulman, I've got your photographs. And I love the photograph you took of Frank Sinatra's bedroom with the beautiful, rare 17th or 18th century paintings which I had on the wall, which you were so great at taking down. Slam the receiver down.
Oh, that was how you were. That was how you were greeted and thanked. Well, we could go on with your stories forever, Julius Shulman. I'm so happy you came to visit us today, and I thank you very much.
You're entirely welcome. It's
Thank
a pleasure
you.
for me to be here.
Yes, I'd love to see you with a camera taking portraits.
You should see my baby pictures.
Okay, I'm going to see him next time. Don't leave, and don't you all leave. We'll be right back with Chef Teri Valentine. Welcome back. I'm Joan Quinn, and I'm with chef and the caterer of Taste Buds, Teri Valentine. Teri was born and raised in Sacramento, graduated from Humboldt State University, and went into the fashion business. Why fashion from Humboldt?
I wanted to go into sales, and it was a choice between advertising or fashion or public relations in New York City. So since it was New York, I just wanted to go into one of the major industries there.
Were you working as a designer, or were you in the...
I was a sales rep.
Oh, you were?
Yes.
So how did you learn how to do that?
Be a sales rep? I went into the management training program at Saks Fifth Avenue, and they taught us everything.
Oh, I
and
see.
then once I was there, I was promoted in 7 months, which was fairly quick. So I went up to the junior department at Saks, and one of my departments was Esprit, and Esprit was the hottest junior company at the time, and they took me as a sales rep, and they trained me.
Oh, so then you went to them from
Yes.
Saks.
Uh-huh.
And then did you work with any other companies?
French Connection Sportswear as well, and that's how I moved back to California, was with French Connection.
How did you like living in New York?
I loved it.
Oh, you
Loved
did?
it. Oh, yeah. It was time to come home. I'd been there for 5 years, but I really loved it.
But we're mixing fashion and food today. And how did that come about then? The step from fashion into food?
I had left the fashion business, went to advertising, and I was laid off about a year after I had taken that job. And I found myself with very little experience in advertising, but I didn't want to go back to the fashion business in Los Angeles. It wasn't as big as it was in New York. So I loved to cook, and I had a friend who was worked at Malibu Times newspaper, and he put an ad in for me that said full service caterer.
You're kidding? He made you a caterer?
He made me a caterer, and people called.
Is that right?
I did probably the hardest job I've done to this day was the first job that I got from that advertisement.
But when you were in New York, you were entertaining your friends and cooking, and you had always done a lot of that.
Yes.
But what was the difference then? Here you were, the caterer. Was it a big dinner?
It was
your first thing?
Oh yeah, it was a hospital on the west side, and they had 60 people coming, all their top people. They needed this huge driveway that was steep, and I had to find something to get the guests to the top of the hill. They wanted a singing harpist. They wanted their whole house completely decorated head to toe, and I just was in a panic. But
I was going to say, were you overwhelmed?
Oh, totally. But my friend who did all the windows for us at Esprit for Bloomingdale's in New York had moved out here too, so I called him lickety-split.
Was he,
Help!
Did he know what to do?
Oh, yeah,
Was
he turned their jacuzzi into a manger. It was amazing. It was a Christmas party, and he made it look great. And I did the food, and I called a friend who was a caterer, and I said, "You're going to have to take this one. This is too big for me." And they said, "We're booked. You're going to have to do it on your own." So I just took it one step at a time. It took me about 6 weeks to do the whole thing, and that's all I focused on. And it was a success. And after that, it just
So Taste Buds Catering was born.
Yeah.
That was great. Before you were catering, or maybe it had to come afterwards. Did you go to Culinary Academy?
When I was working at Esprit, a friend of mine had wanted to start one of those, the Esprit franchises, and I helped him get in. It was very difficult at the time, and so to thank me, he wanted to send me to Club Med, and I said, I don't want to go to Club Med, I want to go to Peter Kump's cooking school. And so
is that
it was
right?
right there in New York, so even though I had no knowledge of doing it later in life, I just went to the home program at night for mostly housewives and people's help they sent to the program. But he was president of James Beard Foundation, so he's a very well-known person. He died 5 years ago.
Oh.
Anyway, it was a great program.
So he was connected, and he
yes.
knew
Yeah. They took it very seriously. It was not we weren't allowed to speak to each other while we were in the class, and they gave us wine, but only after when we ate our dinner, whatever we prepared. And we did, the very first class was just learning how to use knives, and it was the best background, even though it was only an 8-week program. It was the best thing I ever did. So.
You, as a child, though, puttered around in your grandma's kitchen. Did any of that kind of come out in your cooking now? Does any of that?
She did everything from scratch, and I like to do that too. So
Do
I
you?
think it has to be that I inherited some of it. She was amazing.
You know, you also took a job, which I thought was pretty risky, at Disneyland. How did you do that? Wasn't that a big thing,
it
catering?
was. I was going through a personal transition from being married to all of a sudden single mom, and I was at Taste Buds. I had people who worked for me that really weren't trained. I trained them, and I felt like I needed to learn something and be challenged.
You had Taste
I
Buds
kept
at the
Taste
time.
Buds, yeah.
Oh.
So I went off to the first interview, and I was out of 160 people, I was down to 2, and they picked the other person because they were worried that I wouldn't have enough time with 2 kids and another business. But then in July they called back and said, we'd like you to take the job after all, because they got rid of the person that they had chosen instead.
This woman knows how to go uphill. We can take her, right?
Exactly.
But you must have had huge parties there.
We did. I did. When Paul Pressler was moving on to the studios, he was he was in charge of Disneyland when I started. They wanted to do a going away breakfast, and they all said, let's just do muffins. We'll just do muffins for $5,000 for everyone. I said, muffins? So I had this vision that down Main Street, every single chef in the whole park with their big chef hats on would be flipping pancakes, and we'd have a pancake breakfast for $5,000. I thought they were all going to kill me before it was over. Why
did it
can't
work?
we just do the muffins? It poured furiously at 3 in the morning, and so we couldn't be out there with all that electrical. And I stood out there at 3 with my boss on the phone, and I said, it's not raining, my raincoat is not on. I refused to admit that it was raining, and then finally we moved everything up to Fantasyland Theater, and it worked out great. It was a huge hit. And they said, we'll do this again, and everyone on my team said, please no. It was a lot of work.
But one of the things a caterer has to do is to be malleable, to be able to switch places right away, switch venues. And
yes, they call me the MacGyver of catering.
Oh, is that right? So you then opened a restaurant. Tell us where it is, and I'll show this little picture of your dining room.
Inside the Toluca Lake Tennis Club. We're on Forest Lawn Drive, 6711 Forest Lawn Drive. And we have a banquet room, we have a restaurant, we have a patio, and we cater to the members of the club, but it's also open to the public.
How could you decide to move into a tennis club?
A friend of mine called and asked me to do it. I was pretty much decided I wouldn't go back into retail. I really enjoyed just working towards each event and being done with it and starting on the next project. But my husband thought that bar was pretty cool. So
yeah, this is a picture of all the places, the outside and then the bar. So he's buying the wine.
He does all the wine lists, and he does all the cocktails. He does great themed martinis for every holiday. He's done a great job, and he really enjoys it. He has another job as well, but this is his side thing.
Do you do the menus?
Yes, I do all the menus. And we also play tennis, which is a huge plus. As much as we've,
when do you have time to do that?
Well, sometimes they call me and say, Teri, come on out. We need a fourth, and I jump out. So
you're right there.
Yes.
One of the the interesting things that I think that you have on the menu is you do Weight Watchers.
And
You always-
Atkins.
And Atkins. So you
Yes.
always have something there, or is there a little star next to it that says,
We usually put it on just as a special, and so they know what's the regulars ask what's the Atkins special today. Atkins has actually been really, really successful.
Atkins is over there maybe.
This one isn't Atkins, but we do. We usually do a steak, or actually we've done everything.
Well, let's start with this.
This is
first.
our most popular catering dish. It's a steak, but it's marinated in balsamic and soy sauce with a little bit of sugar, and then we make mushrooms out of the same sauce with butter, and then we pour it over the steak afterwards, and it almost is a homemade or a twist on teriyaki, but people can't place the flavor, and they just go crazy for it.
And the mashed potatoes?
They're just homemade.
Regular,
Yep.
regular mashed potatoes?
Garlicky mashed potatoes, red potatoes, and then just the sautéed vegetable.
And the next thing I think is probably one of your keynote.
Both things are. The small little kisses, those are called pastry kisses.
Oh, let me hold
And
these
these
up.
are, they're feta and cream cheese with caramelized onions, and we did them so successfully in catering that somebody suggested we put them in our bread basket at the restaurant, and it's been a huge success. When
So
we
these
don't
are
have
just,
these,
This
we're in
is
trouble.
bread,
It's puff pastry.
but it's not a sweet.
No, it's savory.
And we eat it with.
And then this, well, they are always
I'll
in
eat it now.
the bread basket. And then that's a white chicken chili with sour cream and avocado. And that's really popular. We do a homemade soup and a white chicken chili.
Why
every day.
chili? Why chicken?
It's just healthier. You know, the tennis club is also a sports center. But even since the very first clients I had, they always asked for California style. To the rest of the world, it's health food, but for us here, it's very normal food.
And our last
That's a spice
entree
rub
I'm going to
salmon.
hold.
And salads are the most popular thing that we do at the restaurant at lunch, by far. Even the restaurants across the country are trending with sandwiches. Our salads are still twice as popular. This is spice rub salmon, grilled vegetables on baby greens with a homemade balsamic vinaigrette.
Let me just open it so they can see the inside. It's beautiful. It's
you.
just not quite sushi style.
Right, right.
Just a little bit ahead.
a little translucent.
And for dessert, I
Yeah.
can't lift it. It's too heavy.
This is the typical dessert basket that we do for catering, and it's we have a baker, Julian, who does brown sugar bars, brownies, lemon bars, snickerdoodles, a chocolate espresso cookie. We do them every single day they go out, so he's
And
really good.
You live really close to the studio, so you must have a lot of studio people come in for lunch and.
Yes. We're near Disney, Warner Brothers, ABC, Clear Channel's moving down the street, so very close.
Well, I'm so glad you came today.
Thank you
And
for
thanks
having
for bringing all your food with to us. And thank you for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep riding, 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, 917 in Los Angeles. We'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.